What would you do if everything you believed in comes crashing down, leaving you feeling empty? Mort has to overcome the feeling and find himself. In the opening scene, Mort is narrating his experience at the film festival to his therapist. He explains that he didn't want to go because film festivals are no longer what they were, but he won't anyway because he suspects that his wife, Sue, has a crush on one of her clients who is a film director. In the next scene, Mort and Sue arrive in San Sebastian. They get to the hotel and see Philippe, the director Mort had mentioned, being interviewed. Sue reminds Mort that he had met Philippe and was called the Grinch by him. One of the reporters asks Philippe to address a rumor making him uncomfortable. Sue intervenes, rounds up the interview, and takes Philippe out of the crowd of reporters. She reintroduces Mort and Philippe calls him the Grinch once again. Mort, offended by this, gives Philippe an attitude. Sue notices and makes up an excuse for them to leave. In their hotel room, Sue calls out Mort for his behavior earlier on. He tells her that he didn't like being called the Grinch. Sue argues in Philippe's defense. Mort gets tired of the argument. He complains to her that he's having chest pains, but Sue dismisses it. Mort narrates to his therapist that he had a weird dream that night. In his dream, his mother tells his father, Max, that Rose Budnick had committed and had left a letter saying that life was meaningless. His mother is in deep thought over the contents of her late friend's letter. She tells Mort, who's playing outside, to come inside. The next morning, he mentions the strange dream he had to Sue, but she can't listen to him because she's running late. He asks if they can meet up for lunch, but she tells him that she's having lunch with Philippe and a reporter from Paris Match. Mort continues narrating to the therapist that he isn't comfortable with Sue spending the day with Philippe. Mort mentions his wife's love for brilliant men to the therapist. In the next scene, Mort is walking around, not knowing where he's headed. He thinks about his book and how tough it is to write a book that'll be a masterpiece. He calls the names of people who created masterpieces and picks out Fellini to be his favorite. He had also taught a course on his films. Mort starts daydreaming and everything turns black and white. He meets Miss Weinstein, his English teacher, who gives him advice when he tells her that he's writing a novel. He turns to see Rabbi Mintz, who says that he sometimes wonders if Mort is a Jew, shaking his head in disappointment when Mort blasphemes against God. He also meets Marcia Cohens, a girl he once liked who didn't like him back, and his parents, who also give him a bit of advice. Just then, Mort is called back to reality by his friend Tomas. They exchange pleasantries. Tomas tells Mort that he had met Sue at the beach with Philippe earlier on. Mort isn't pleased to hear this and turns pale. Tomas sees that his friend isn't looking good and asks what the problem is. Mort tells Tomas that his chest is hurting and is given a doctor's number. He calls the number and is told to come the next day. At the hotel's restaurant, Mort sits with Sue at a table and asks about her day. She tells him that she was busy, to which he asks if she didn't get a break. She informs him that an interview was canceled, so they went out for some fresh air. They both place their order. Sue informs Mort that she had invited Philippe to join them for dinner upon sighting him. Philippe apologizes for being late and sits with them. While Sue and Philippe discuss ideas for the premiere of his movie, Mort feels invincible because they ignore any comment made by him. Back in their room, Mort continues his narration. He says that he got into an argument with Sue when he told her that it was a joke to compare Philippe to the French New Wave directors. He goes to sleep and has another odd dream. In the dream, Sue is sitting at the beach while Mort talks to Philippe on another side of the beach. He seems to be fine with Sue and Philippe seeing each other. Philippe runs back to where Sue is and sits beside her. She tells him that she doesn't feel like she's lived passionately despite leaving her first husband for Mort, but now he, Philippe, is here. When Mort joins them, she suggests that they become a throuple. The next morning, Mort is on the way to the hospital. He continues his narration. He says that the dream is weird but true in a way, stating that Sue can do anything because she fears nothing. At the hospital, the doctor, Joanna Rojas, asks what the problem is and he tells her about his chest pains. She asks him some other questions and he answers. She proceeds to ask if he is visiting San Sebastian and he confirms that he is. He adds that he's from New York and asks if she's ever been there. Dr. Joe tells him that she had attended NYU and also wanted to practice there but came back because of her husband. They talk more and find out that they both dislike Philippe's movie. Mort is taken by the doctor. In the next scene, Mort gets checked and Dr. Rojas tells him that there's nothing wrong with his heart. She adds that she'll get his blood test results in a few days, and if he doesn't hear from her, it means that everything is fine with him. Just as he's about to leave, he confesses that he had thought she was a man and tells her a bit about himself. He finds out that she had stayed in Paris for some time. Outside the hospital, Mort thinks about Dr. Rojas and who she's married to. He says that she's charming and had charged his day. Later in the evening, Mort had dinner with a lot of people in the movie industry. He notices that Sue and Philippe are exchanging knowing glances like they are in on an inside joke that no one else knows. In the next scene, Mort meets Tomas at the bar. Tomas invites him to join them and introduces Mort to his friends, Ramon Robles and Gil Brenner. Tomas tells Mort that he had gotten Dr. Rojas' number from Gil and asks how his meeting went. Mort asks Gil how long he's known her, and Gil tells him that he's known her since she was a student. Gil feels obliged to tell them all about Joanna's married life with her past husband and her current husband, who's a painter. He states that she has a knack for getting married to horrible men. Mort gets worried for her when he hears that her current husband is a drunkard. In the next scene, Mort is sitting on a bench. He continues narrating. He says that he has given up on seeing Jo again since he hasn't heard from her, but that didn't mean she wasn't on his mind. He starts daydreaming. The scene changes and Mort is in a car with the doctor, Joanna. They are on their way to Paris. He asks her if she believes in first love and she replies that she does. She tells him that his blood pressure is 185 but they'll get it down together, looking at him lovingly. Later on, Mort is back to reality and calls the hospital. The nurse assistant tells him that there was no need for a follow-up. He mentions that he has a bump on his hand and wants the doctor to take a look at it. The nurse tells him to come by 6:30. At the hotel, Mort rushes to the room to get prepared but is stopped by Sue, who tells him that they have a screening to attend. He informs her of his appointment at the hospital to check the bump on his hand. She checks it out and tells him that it's just a bug bite. However, because of his pre-planned intention, Mort states his desire to get it checked by a professional. Just then, a dermatologist who was with Sue earlier offers to take a look at the bump. He repeats what Sue said earlier about it being a bug bite, and he adds that the bump will go in a few days. At the screening, they are all intensely watching the movie. Mort turns to see that Sue and Philippe's hands are close to each other. He starts daydreaming. Mort and Sue become the main characters of the movie. Sue invites Mort to have a smoke, saying that it might help with writing his novel. She asks him who he'd like to have a threesome with. He mentions his brother's wife, Doris. In the next scene, Philippe is being interviewed. The reporter tells him that he's being called a woman's director. Philippe tells the reporter that he's a romantic and appreciates women because they don't hide their emotions, unlike men. The reporter asks if he also got a sailboat, to which Philippe confirms that he did. Afterward, Sue walks with Philippe. She tells him that her father had taught her how to sail. Coincidentally, Philippe tells her that his father also taught him how to sail, adding that his father was in the Navy. Sue tells Philippe that he answered the question on love and passion very well, saying that she thought she would have to bail him out. He asks her if she sensed that he was talking about her. She is flattered but tells him that he shouldn't say things like that. He stops walking, moves close to her, and asks her why. Sue tells him that it makes her confront feelings that she's been pushing back on. He asks if it will be terrible to sail with him to Koh Rong, an island on the South Seas. Sue tells him that he has a way of tapping into her fantasies, to which he replies that he's a film director. He lets her realize that he knows when a woman is dreaming of a love affair by looking straight into her eyes. She melts under his gaze. In the next scene, Mort is calling the hospital again. He tells the person at the other end of the call that his ear is ringing and he wants to get it checked. Mort narrates that he's always been scared to visit doctors because they might tell him that he has one more month left. But with Dr. Joanna Rojas, he doesn't mind a checkup every day. He buys a guidebook to see if he'd skipped any sites while he kills time before his appointment. He goes sightseeing, visiting the church in town. In the next scene, Mort goes to his appointment at the hospital. He asks Dr. Jo if she misses New York, and she says she does. The nurse comes in and informs Dr. Rojas that her husband is on the line and that she's leaving for the day. Rojas goes to the nurse assistant's table to answer the call. She seems agitated, so Mort gets up to leave. Joanna ends the call and Mort asks her about the places she liked at the Central Park. Then, she takes an excuse and leaves to make a call. On the call, she's shouting at the person on the other line. Soon, she comes back in and apologizes for the commotion. She answers the question he asked earlier and tells him that she frequented the Met and used to sit on the stairs in spring. Suddenly, she starts crying and tells him to leave. Mort asks if she's okay and offers to buy her a drink. He gives her a napkin to clean her tears. At the open bar, Mort asks Joanna if he can be the doctor for a moment, and she agrees. He asks her to tell him her symptoms. She tells him that her marriage is causing her to have pains in her heart. She tells him that her husband is having affairs, but she's fine with it since she agreed to an open marriage. He asks her if she has had an affair, to which she replies that she hasn't. She asks him the same question and he says that he hasn't. He opens up to her and tells her that his marriage hasn't been good. She tells him that her husband, Paco, threatens to kill him whenever she tries to leave him. Mort tells her that he is bluffing, adding that no one will kill themselves for love. Joanna tells him that her life in San Sebastian is not bad and that she loves the city. She asks if he's seen the city. He says that his wife has been too busy to show him around, and Jo offers to show him around. She informs him that she'll pick him up the next morning by 10. In the next scene, Sue is getting dressed in their hotel room when Mort walks in. She queries his whereabouts and he states that he went to see a doctor because he had a ringing in his ear. She mentions the stench of alcohol coming from him and he lies that he had a drink with Tomas. Sue gives him a book on Ingmar Bergman that a Swedish journalist had given Philippe, who already had one. Knowing that he loves Bergman, she had taken it for him. Sue tells him to hurry up so that they can go to the cocktail party. Then she also lets him know that he doesn't have to go if he doesn't want to. He asks her if Philippe is going and she tells him that the party is in his honor. At the party, Sue joins Mort and Philippe. She proudly tells Mort that Philippe's movie had won a prize in Germany. She tells Philippe that the Swedish journalists that watched his movie loved it. Philippe invites Mort and Sue to come to a jazz club where he'd be playing the bongo drums later that evening. Mort and Sue honor Philippe's invitation. Sue dances as Philippe plays the drum, smiling brightly at him. Mort doesn't seem excited to be there, unlike his wife. Later at night, Mort gets another strange dream. Jo stands behind the curtain, her silhouette giving off an eerie vibe. She comes out as Sue stands from the bed and they hug. Sue states that she has never cheated on Mort but came close once. They both start speaking a strange language. The next morning, Mort is having breakfast with Sue. He tells her that he's been having strange dreams since he came to the festival. He asks her if she's busy throughout the day and she tells him that she is. Mort informs her of his plans to get a car driver to show him outside the town. Then Philippe shows up and asks if Sue is ready. She praises his drumming skills the night before. They leave when Mort comments something slightly rude to Philippe. Later on, Jo picks Mort up as promised. She takes him to a lot of places acting as his tour guide. They take a boat out of town. They buy some bread and chocolate and go on a picnic. Mort asks her why she isn't leaving her husband. She tells him that her husband loves her and she's scared to start over again and get a second divorce. Jo mentions that she's been having a desire to drop her practice. She tells him that she wants to enjoy life and find herself. She asks if he knows himself and he tells her that he thought he did, but since he came to the film festival, he's been having strange thoughts that make him question everything. Jo tells him that she's tired and lies on the mat to take a nap. Mort stands up and takes a look around the area. He sees a building and he starts daydreaming. Mort sees his friends, his brother, and his wife. They all sit at a table. His friend Paul says that he's been looking forward to having them. Mort's brother thanks Paul for having them and says that he and Doris will rent a house around the area next year. Mort is asked if he prefers the beach or the countryside. His brother informs them that Paris has always been Mort's fantasy. Doris tells them that when she dated Mort, he took her to watch some movies and she was bored, so she married his brother. They ask Mort to recommend a movie for them and he recommends a Japanese movie. Mort goes outside and he sees his brother and Doris sitting on a mat. He overhears their dialogue. She tells his brother that she thinks Mort still has a crush on her. She also thinks that Mort will never finish his novel because it prevents him from knowing the truth, suggesting that maybe literary greatness isn't for him. They talk about Sue and his brother says that he's surprised that she's still with Mort. Doris feels that Mort isn't the right person for her. She leans in for a kiss and he kisses her. Back in reality, Mort and the doctor go back into town. She suggests that they stop by the market because she wants to get Paco a birthday gift. At the market, Jo asks Mort if he likes flea markets and he replies that if she takes him to a flea market then he's going to love it. Together, they look for a reasonable gift for Paco. On a boat heading back to town, Jo asks Mort what he's thinking about. He tells her that he's thinking that the city is really pretty and that he hasn't traveled much. He lists some places that he's never been to. He tells her that he's not interested in seeing them, but the Boulevard St. Michel in the rain is a sight that'll make him happy. On their way back, Joanna and Mort hear a loud noise. Mort asks if it's a flat tire and Jo believes that it could be. She stops the car and gets down to see that it's what they suspected. She asks Mort if he can change a tire. She brings out the tools and Mort tells her to bring out the spare tire. She checks but doesn't see one in the truck. Paco, her husband, seems to have used it and not replaced it. However, she lets him know that they're not far from her home and suggests hitching a ride. They eventually hitched a ride in the back of a truck. Mort tells her that he had fun and gives her a gift. She loves the gift and keeps it in her bag. In the next scene, they arrive at Jo's house. Joanna sees Paco with another woman upon walking in. They start arguing in Spanish. He asks Jo who Mort is and Mort replies that he's just a friend. She stops Paco from trying to take a drink. Mort seems to understand what they're saying and suggests that they all share a cab into town, but Jo tells him that she'll drop herself. Joanna takes Mort and the woman Paco was with back into town. When they get to the front of the hotel, Mort and the woman come down from the car, and so does Jo. She apologizes to him and he tells her that it was not her fault. The woman interrupts, telling Jo that Paco loves her a lot. Then she utters something in Spanish and leaves. Jo gets into the car, waves Mort goodbye, and drives off. In the next scene, Mort is climbing the stairs to get to his room. He meets Gil, who asks about his health and he tells her that he's better. Mort asks him how the press conference went, but surprisingly Gil tells him that there was no press conference. He adds that there was no event all day except the Louis Bundle Award that the Spaniards are initiating to honor filmmakers, adding that Philippe's the one to kick it off. He tells Mort that the award is later in the evening and he should come. At their hotel room, Sue tells Mort to hurry up if he's going with her. He asks her if the press conference went well and she tells him that it did. She states that he doesn't have to come with her if he doesn't want to, but he says that it's fine with him. Later on, Mort continues his narration. He says that he went to the award night out of respect for Buñuel, a director he loves. But he left the dinner when they started singing Philippe's praises. He remembers the dream he had that night vividly. In his dream, he sits at a table with several people. Tomas makes a toast to Philippe's movie and another woman makes a toast to Mort's novel, calling it a work in no progress. Doris states that if Mort ever finishes his novel, it will only be full of thoughts. The dream becomes pretty chaotic with several things happening at once. Mort asks her to leave with him and she agrees. They start leaving but get stuck at the door. His brother tries but also gets stuck. Just then, Sue wakes a whimpering Mort and tells him that he's having a nightmare. He tells her that she smells of diluted ethanol. She admits that she's drunk and tells him that it's the perfect time to have a conversation. She suggests that they break up, saying that their marriage is doomed. Mort asks if she's been sleeping with Philippe and she confesses that she has. He tells her that it's okay for her to want to break up. He's calm even though the woman he's married to is breaking up with him. The next morning, Mort continues narrating and says that it's not proper to wash away a relationship that once had promise. He dialed the hospital line, but it didn't go through. Mort sees Gil sitting at a table with some people and asks if he has Dr. Rojas's home phone. Gil confirms that he has the number and writes it down for Mort. At home, Joanna receives a call. Mort introduces himself and tells her that he got her number from Gil Brenner. He asks how she is and tells her that he had a nice time yesterday, and she says that it was the same for her. Mort asks if she's free, but Joanna says that she's going to stay at home and get some things done. He informs her that the festival is almost over and he'll be going back to New York. They talk a little bit more and then hang up. In the next scene, Mort is at the beach. He continues his narration. He states that he always thinks of Rose Budnick, who gives up whenever he gets depressed. He starts daydreaming and sees Death in a human form. They play chess together. Death tells him that he wants Mort to come to terms with him so that he can enjoy life. Mort tells Death that he can take him, adding that he's made some bad decisions and that his life feels empty. However, Death lets him know that he can make it full of work, family, or love. Death continues to give him more advice before leaving. Walking along the streets, Mort continues narrating. He talks about how he got to examine his life and his time with Joe, a dream that didn't come true. The scene switches back to the one at the beginning of the movie. Mort then asks if his therapist has anything else to say. Kindly subscribe and like for more videos. Thank you for watching.